When I was growing up, my family had a saying, family comes first, no matter what. I believed that wholeheartedly until my Aunt Deborah decided that family first only applied when it benefited her son, my cousin Tyler. I'm Emma Thompson, 32, an architectural preservationist specializing in historical buildings in Boston. Most people see me as the quiet, accommodating family member who never causes trouble. What my family doesn't know is that my accommodation was actually careful observation, and my quiet demeanor masked a growing determination to build something meaningful for myself, away from their constant judgment. My greatest achievement isn't something you can see on a resume. 3 years ago, I discovered a crumbling 1890s brownstone in Back Bay that developers were planning to gut and convert into luxury condos. I saw past the peeling paint and water damage to the original woodwork, the hand-carved banister, and the irreplaceable craftsmanship. Against everyone's advice, I leveraged everything I had, took out loans I wasn't sure I could repay, and worked with local historical societies to save not just that building, but the entire row of 5 connected brownstones. The project won a preservation award, but more importantly, it gave me financial independence in a way my family never expected or acknowledged. My relationship with my family, especially my mother's sister Deborah, has always been complicated. Deborah has a way of making everyone feel like they're never quite good enough, especially me. She's the family's self-appointed success barometer, constantly comparing everyone's achievements to her son Tyler's mediocre accomplishments. While I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college, Tyler drifted from one expensive private university to another, never finishing a degree but somehow always being praised for his potential. Every family gathering becomes a showcase for Tyler's latest half-baked business idea or his new luxury car, courtesy of his mother's checkbook. What my family doesn't know, what they're about to discover at our upcoming reunion, is that I don't just restore historical buildings, I own them. And not just any building. I recently acquired the entire apartment complex where I live, say, historic 6-story building in Cambridge with 24 units, including the penthouse that I've quietly renovated and moved into. It's not just an investment, it's a statement about who I really am. The doorman, Miguel, who's worked there for 30 years, is the only one who knows the truth, and he's become both a confidant and an unexpected ally in maintaining my privacy. Last month, Aunt Deborah called to tell me that Tyler needs a place to stay in Boston for his exciting new job opportunity. She didn't ask if I had space. She informed me that I would be temporarily relocating from my little apartment to make room for Tyler. What she doesn't realize is that this upcoming family reunion, which, ironically, will be held in my building's community room at my mother's request, will force me to reveal a truth I've been keeping to myself. I am not just a tenant, I am the owner, and I'm done being the family doormat. Have you ever kept a part of yourself hidden from your family, knowing they wouldn't understand or appreciate it? Have you smiled through their dismissive comments while building something remarkable they couldn't see? That's been my life for years, but sometimes, the universe creates the perfect moment to finally stand in your truth, even when that truth will shake your family to its core. From the outside, the Thompson family looks like the quintessential American success story. My parents, both retired professors, built their reputation in academic circles throughout New England. My father specialized in American literature at Harvard, while my mother was a respected art history professor at Boston College. My older brother, James, followed their academic path and is now a tenured professor himself. We attend cultural events together, donate to local charities, and maintain a carefully curated presence on social media that showcases our accomplishments and family unity. Every Christmas, Aunt Deborah insists on a professional family photo shoot for her elaborate cards that get sent to everyone in her extensive social network. The caption might as well read, "The Thompsons, accomplished, united, perfect." But behind closed doors, the reality is starkly different. The family operates on a clear hierarchy, with Aunt Deborah at the top. After my father's early retirement due to health issues, Deborah, who married into money through her husband Richard, a banking executive, assumed the role of family matriarch and financial advisor. She's tall, impeccably dressed, with a voice that can cut through steel and a smile that never reaches her eye. Her frequent advice comes wrapped in judgment. "Emma, darling, have you considered a more professional wardrobe? First impressions are everything in the real world." Or, "Preservation is such a quaint hobby, but wouldn't your analytical skills be better applied in real estate development?" Tyler's mentor is always looking for bright young things to train. Each suggestion implies that my choices are somehow deficient, my passion misguided, my independence a phase to outgrow. My mother, once a strong-willed academic, has gradually surrendered to Deborah's dominance. She mediates rather than defends, always trying to keep the peace while tacitly allowing Deborah's behavior. That's just how your aunt shows she cares, she'll say after Deborah has spent an hour critiquing my life choices. My father retreats into his books, avoiding conflict entirely. My brother James maintains distance by living in Chicago, visiting only on major holidays and escaping most of Deborah's direct criticism by virtue of his prestigious academic position, though he still receives plenty of comparisons to Tyler. Real-world business acumen. Meanwhile, Uncle Richard is perpetually absent, always on business trips or working late, his main contribution being the money that funds Tyler's lifestyle and Deborah's social aspirations. When I was 12, I won a statewide essay competition on architectural preservation. The ceremony was scheduled on the same weekend as Tyler's middle school soccer tournament. Despite Tyler's team finishing in 4th place, Aunt Deborah insisted the entire family attend his games instead of my awards ceremony. It's just an essay, Emma. Tyler is building character through teamwork and athletics. I went to my ceremony alone, taking the bus across town. The following Thanksgiving, Deborah proudly displayed Tyler's participation trophy on the mantle while my certificate remained in my backpack, unmentioned. At 16, I was accepted into a summer program at MIT for young women interested in structural engineering. Deborah convinced my parents it was too advanced and would set me up for disappointment, suggesting instead that I join Tyler at the country club where I could make valuable social connections. When I applied to college, Deborah pushed for me to attend her alma mater to study business, despite my clear interest in architecture and preservation. Creative fields are for people who can afford to be impractical, Emma. Our family builds security first. 3 months ago, I took a significant risk by personally guaranteeing a $2.8 million loan to secure and begin restoration on a historic theater in downtown Boston that was scheduled for demolition. The Majestic Theater had been part of Boston's cultural landscape since 1903, hosting everything from vaudeville to silent films to Broadway production. I organized community funding, worked with historical societies, and put my professional reputation on the line to save it. Once restoration is complete, it will become a mixed-use space for performing arts and community events, with affordable studios for local artists in the adjacent building. I invited my entire family to the project announcement and fundraising gala, hoping they might finally see the value in my work. My parents came but left early. James sent flowers. Aunt Deborah and Tyler didn't show up at all, despite confirming their attendance. The next day, Deborah sent a group text to the family about Tyler's exciting new partnership with a luxury condo developer, the same developer who had wanted to demolish the theater. What my family doesn't know is that their dismissal of my theater project pushed me to make the biggest move of my life. The day after that fundraiser, I received a call from an elderly gentleman named Walter Cunningham. He'd attended the gala and was impressed with my preservation work. Walter, it turned out, was the owner of my apartment building and several other historical properties in Boston. He had no heirs and was concerned about developers destroying his carefully maintained properties after his death. Over the next 2 months, we developed a plan. I would purchase his entire portfolio of 7 buildings, including my apartment complex, at below market value, with a legal covenant requiring their historical character to be preserved. The deal closed 3 weeks ago. I now own not just my apartment, but the entire building and 6 others across Boston, a real estate portfolio worth over $40 million. I discovered this opportunity not through family connections or privilege, but through my own reputation and work ethic. The irony that Tyler's new job opportunity involves him wanting to stay in a building I now own is something only Miguel the Doorman and I currently appreciate. The annual Thompson family reunion is traditionally held on the 3rd weekend of July at various family members' homes on rotation. This year, my mother suggested hosting it at my apartment building's community room, a restored 1920s ballroom with ornate moldings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River. It's such a lovely space, Emma, she said, and we've never had a proper gathering at your place. She didn't know that I'd recently redecorated the space as one of my first projects as owner, replacing the generic furniture with period-appropriate pieces and restoring the original parquet flooring. I agreed immediately, suppressing a smile at the thought of my family unknowingly gathering in a space that symbolized my secret success. The week before the reunion, I vacillated between anxiety and determination. I prepared a portfolio documenting my preservation projects, including before and after photos of the Majestic Theater restoration and early blueprints for improvements to the apartment complex. I also placed the building's original deed from 1898, alongside the new deed with my name on it, in a sealed envelope in my desk drawer. I wasn't planning to reveal my ownership that day, but I wanted to be prepared if the moment presented itself. When the day arrived, I descended from my penthouse to the community room, portfolio tucked under my arm. Aunt Deborah arrived first, as always, immediately critiquing the room's decor. It's a bit old-fashioned, isn't it? Tyler's firm specializes in modern renovations that preserve just enough history to be marketable while appealing to contemporary tastes. She barely glanced at the portfolio I tried to show her, instead launching into a detailed explanation of Tyler's new project with the luxury developer. When I mentioned my theater restoration, she waved her hand dismissively. That's sweet, Emma, but these community projects rarely turn a profit. Tyler's development will create real value. My mother quickly changed the subject to the upcoming dinner arrangements, while my father buried himself in examining the original crown molding, murmuring appreciatively but saying nothing to contradict Deborah. The sting was familiar, but for the first time, it didn't devastate me. I found myself observing their reactions with an almost anthropological detachment, secure in the knowledge that I no longer needed their validation. My brother James arrived with his wife Lisa, immediately pulling me into a warm hug. The place looks amazing, Em. You've really found your calling with this preservation work. Lisa, an interior designer, marveled at the restored ballroom. Did the building management let you consult on the restoration? It has your eye for detail all over it. Before I could respond, Tyler burst in, dragging an enormous suitcase behind him. Cousin Emma, your building is hard to find, the facade is so understated. But the doorman was super helpful when I told him I'd be staying with you for a few months. He's already holding a key for me, right? James caught my eye, raising an eyebrow. In question, I hadn't told anyone about Aunt Deborah's arrangement for Tyler. Uncle Richard followed behind Tyler, immediately taking business calls in the corner while nodding absently at family members. My cousin Sophie, Uncle Richard's niece from his first marriage, arrived last, giving me a conspiratorial wink. This place is gorgeous, Emma. Much nicer than Tyler described it. Sophie had always been an ally, the only family member who seemed to genuinely appreciate my work without qualification. Throughout the afternoon, I found myself watching my family with new clarity. I noticed how my mother flinched slightly every time Deborah made a pronouncement, how my father's eyes would momentarily close when Tyler launched into another self-aggrandizing story. I saw how James strategically directed conversations away from topics that might trigger Deborah's criticism, and how Sophie quietly supported anyone who became a target. Most strikingly, I observed how naturally they all deferred to Deborah, seeking her approval on everything from the catering to the seating arrangement. I had always been part of this dance, but now, standing slightly apart with my secret knowledge, I saw the choreography for what it was, a dysfunctional routine built around one person's need for control and another's unearned privilege. As dinner progressed, the provocations began. Emma, darling, Aunt Deborah announced loudly over dessert. Tyler tells me your little apartment has the most charming view of the river. I've been thinking it would be perfect for him while he oversees the new development project. It's just you in that one bedroom, right? You could easily stay with a friend for a few months. She didn't wait for my response before continuing. We'll need to update some things, of course. Tyler needs a proper home office, and that vintage kitchen you described sounds quaint but impractical. My mother looked uncomfortable but said nothing. My father studied his plate. James opened his mouth to object, but I caught his eye and subtly shook my head. Actually, I said calmly, I've recently renovated. It's quite comfortable now. Deborah smiled condescendingly. Well, renovated or not, family helps family. Tyler needs to be in Cambridge for this project, and your location is ideal. Tyler added, don't worry, cuz I'll take good care of your little place. Maybe even add some improvements. My designer has amazing ideas for small spaces. The dismissive tone, the assumption that I would simply yield my home, the complete disregard for my agency. It was all so familiar, yet suddenly unbearable. During the family gift exchange, another Thompson tradition, the dynamic continued. My carefully selected gifts, a first edition book on architecture for my father, a hand-restored antique brooch for my mother, were acknowledged with polite thanks but quickly overshadowed by Deborah's extravagant presence. When it came time for my gift, Deborah presented me with a gift card to a business casual clothing store. For your professional development, Emma. First impressions matter in the real world. The condescension was palpable. Tyler gave me a self-help book titled Beyond Passion, Turning Creative Hobbies into Profitable Careers, with several passages already highlighted. I thought of you immediately when I saw this, he said, as if bestowing great wisdom. Your preservation thing is cute, but this could help you scale it into something meaningful. I thanked them both with a practiced smile, even as I felt something finally break inside me. Later, as family members mingled around the room, I overheard Deborah speaking to my mother. I worry about Emma, you know. At her age, I was already managing Richard's investment portfolio. What exactly does she do all day? These passion projects don't build real security. And where does she get the money for this apartment? The preservation field hardly pays enough for this location. The implication that my financial situation might involve something questionable, was the final straw. The turning point came during what should have been a simple toast. Aunt Deborah, glass of champagne raised high, had taken it upon herself to deliver a state of the family address, an insufferable tradition she'd instituted 5 years ago. "I'd like to celebrate our family's accomplishments this year," she began, her voice carrying that familiar note of authority that commanded silence. "James has secured tenure, continuing our family's academic legacy. Richard's banking division has exceeded projections for the 3rd quarter running. My Tyler," here her voice swelled with pride, "has been appointed project manager for the Riverside Heights development, the most exclusive new property in Cambridge." She detailed Tyler's visionary plans to transform outdated buildings into luxury condominiums. With sickening clarity, I realized he was describing a development less than 3 blocks from my building, a row of historic brownstones I had been fighting to protect through the Historical Commission. "And soon," Deborah continued, "Tyler will be overseeing operations right here in Emma's neighborhood, staying in her apartment while she graciously relocates temporarily." She turned to me with a tight smile. "We're so pleased Emma has found a nice little apartment in this building, though of course we hope she'll eventually find something more permanent and appropriate. Perhaps Tyler can help you invest in a proper condo once his development is complete." The room fell silent, everyone looking at me expectantly. In that moment, I felt a strange calm descend. For years, I had swallowed my responses, smiled through the dismissals, accepted the rewriting of my narrative. "No more. Actually, Aunt Deborah," I said, my voice steady, "I won't be relocating. Tyler won't be staying in my apartment." Deborah's smile tightened further. "Now, Emma, we've already discussed this. Family helps family. Tyler needs—" I cut her off, something I had never done before. "What Tyler needs and what Tyler gets are 2 different things. This isn't about family helping family. This is about you deciding, without consulting me, that my home is available for Tyler's use." A flush crept up Deborah's neck. "Emma, be reasonable. It's just for a few months, and it's not as if you've built a real home there. It's a rental, for goodness sake." The condescension in her tone was the final push I needed. "It's not a rental, Aunt Deborah. It hasn't been for some time." I walked to my portfolio on the side table and removed the sealed envelope containing the deed. 3 weeks ago, I completed the purchase of this building. I handed the documents to my father, whose eyes widened as he reviewed them. "Not just this building, actually. The entire Thompson Historical Properties portfolio, 7 buildings across Boston and Cambridge, including this one." The silence in the room was absolute. The previous owner, Walter Cunningham, approached me after the Majestic Theater fundraiser, the one you couldn't attend because Tyler had a networking event. I turned to face the entire family. Walter had no heirs interested in preservation. He'd followed my restoration projects for years and wanted his properties in the hands of someone who would protect their historical integrity rather than gut them for quick profits. I looked directly at Tyler. "Including the brownstones your developer is trying to acquire for Riverside Heights. I own those 2 now." Aunt Deborah's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips, her face cycling through disbelief, shock, and the beginnings of anger. "That's impossible," she sputtered. "Those properties are worth about $43 million at current market value." I finished for her, though the purchase price was considerably lower, given the preservation covenants I signed. My mother had gone pale. My father was still staring at the deeds, and James was failing to suppress a grin. Tyler looked completely lost. But where would you get that kind of money? Your little preservation jobs couldn't possibly," Deborah began, the implication clear in her tone. I cut her off again. "My little preservation jobs have won 3 national awards and a MacArthur grant. The Majestic Theater project alone secured over $6 million in historical preservation funding. I've built a reputation, Aunt Deborah, while you were busy dismissing my career as a hobby." At that moment, Miguel the doorman entered with a tray of coffee. Seeing the tension, he began to back out, but I called to him. "It's fine, Miguel. Family discussion." He nodded respectfully. "Of course, Ms. Thompson." As he turned to leave, Deborah, attempting to regain control of the situation, interjected sharply. "Young man, while you're here, my son Tyler will be needing a key to Emma's apartment. He'll be staying there for the next few months." Miguel looked confused, glancing between us. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't provide keys to Ms. Thompson's residence without her authorization." Deborah's smile became brittle. "Yes, I understand, but this is a family matter. Emma will be staying elsewhere while her cousin uses her apartment." Miguel straightened, his professionalism taking on a new dimension. "I apologize, ma'am, but that would be against building policy. Ms. Thompson is the owner of the property. I can't issue keys to her personal residence without her explicit instruction." Deborah blinked rapidly. "The owner of her apartment, you mean the condo?" Miguel glanced at me, and I gave him a small nod. "No, ma'am," he said clearly. "Ms. Thompson is the owner of the entire building." "Good morning, Madam Owner, he added with a respectful nod in my direction before exiting. The silence that followed was deafening. Deborah stood frozen, her face a mask of shock and confusion. Tyler's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. My father was the first to recover, looking up from the deeds with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pride mingled with something like regret. Emma, he said quietly, this is extraordinary. Before anyone else could speak, I gathered my portfolio and stood. The community room is reserved for your use until 6 this evening. I have a meeting with the Historical Commission regarding the brownstones Tyler's company is trying to acquire. I should be back by dinner time. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Tyler? I can recommend several excellent hotels in the area. The Kendall has particularly good monthly rates. I left without looking back, the weight of years of dismissal and diminishment lifting with each step. As the elevator doors closed behind me, I caught a glimpse of my reflection, shoulders back, head high, a small smile playing at the corner of my mouth. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly seen. Outside, the summer air hit my face like freedom. My phone immediately began buzzing with messages and calls, but I silenced it and walked toward the river. Whatever storm was brewing in that room, it would wait. I had spent years accommodating their demands and expectations. Now they could wait for mine. Behind me, I heard the unmistakable sound of Aunt Deborah's raised voice echoing from the open windows of the community room, followed by my mother's placating tones and what sounded like my father's firm response. Whatever was happening, the family dynamic had irrevocably shifted. I had finally claimed my place, not just in the building I owned, but in my own narrative. The aftermath was exactly as chaotic as I'd expected. Within an hour of leaving the community room, my phone had logged 37 missed calls and 62 text messages. Aunt Deborah vacillated between fury, how dare you embarrass the family like this, disbelief, there must be some misunderstanding about the property arrangements, and desperate bargaining. Tyler's project is critical for his career, surely we can reach some accommodation. Tyler himself sent a series of increasingly desperate texts, starting with indignation, way to blindside everyone, cuz, moving to awkward attempts at alliance, we should talk business, two real estate minds together, and finally, landing on thinly veiled threats. Dad's lawyers will want to review those property transfers. My mother sent a single message, we need to talk, Emma. Please come home when you're ready. Most surprising were the messages from extended family members who had witnessed the confrontation. Cousin Sophie's exuberant queen energy. Call me ASAP, Uncle Richard's uncharacteristically direct, impressive business acumen. Let's discuss investment strategies next week, and even my cousin-in-law Jessica's simple, about time someone stood up to her. The first meaningful conversation came that evening when James and Lisa appeared at my penthouse door with a bottle of champagne and Chinese takeout. I have waited 15 years to see Aunt Deborah speechless, James said, popping the cork. As we settled on my terrace overlooking the river, the look on her face when Miguel called you, Madam Owner, I wish I'd had a camera. Lisa arranged cartons of food on the outdoor table. After you left, it was pandemonium. Deborah kept insisting there must be some mistake, that you couldn't possibly have that kind of money or business sense. James took over the story. Dad finally snapped, I've never seen anything like it. He told Deborah that she'd been undermining you for years while you were quietly building something remarkable. He said he'd been complicit in allowing it and was ashamed of himself. James paused, his expression softening. He said he's always been proud of you, Em, but never knew how to stand up to Deborah. He said watching you walk out that door with your head high was like seeing Mom in her prime, before she started deferring to Deborah too. Over the next week, I learned more about my family than I had in 32 years. My father visited my office at the Historical Society, bringing coffee and asking for a tour of the majestic theater restoration. As we walked through the partially renovated space, he confessed that he'd followed my career from afar, collecting articles about my preservation work in a folder he kept in his study. I should have said something, Emma. Every time Deborah dismissed your work, I told myself it wasn't my place to intervene. He ran his hand along a restored column, his academics eye appreciating the craftsmanship. The truth is, I was intimidated by her. After my health forced early retirement, after we had to rely on her financial advice during the recession, I surrendered my voice in the family. He looked at me directly, his eyes clear and sad. But that's no excuse. I failed you, and I'm sorry. The simple acknowledgement, devoid of justification or expectation, was more healing than I could have imagined. We spent 3 hours discussing architectural details and preservation techniques, my father revealing a depth of knowledge about my field that stunned me. I've read every article you've published, he admitted. I just never had the courage to tell you how brilliant I think you are. 2 days later, Walter Cunningham invited me to his retirement home in Beacon Hill to meet his extended family and explain my plans for his former properties. The elegant townhouse was filled with Cunningham relatives, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, who had rejected Walter's pleas to take over the family properties, but now seemed intensely interested in the woman who had. As I detailed my restoration plans and preservation covenants, showing before and after photos of my previous projects, I realized I was standing in a room full of people who truly understood the value of what I did. Walter's grandniece Sarah, an architectural photographer, asked thoughtful questions about my technique. His nephew Michael, a historic materials specialist, offered to consult on sourcing period-appropriate fixtures. By evening's end, I had not just professional connections, but the beginnings of friendships with people who shared my passion. "I knew I was right about you," Walter said as I prepared to leave, patting my hand. "You don't just see buildings, you see stories, histories, futures." The Thompson historical properties couldn't be in better hands. The contrast between the Cunningham gathering and my own family reunions couldn't have been more stark. Where Aunt Deborah measured success in square footage and property values, Walter valued preservation and integrity. Where Tyler talked endlessly about disrupting markets and maximizing returns, the Cunninghams discussed craftsmanship and historical significance. The difference wasn't wealth. Both families had plenty, but value. For the first time, I saw clearly how my aunt's narrow definition of success had warped our family dynamic, forcing everyone to compete in a game with rules designed to ensure only Tyler could win. The revelation was both liberating and saddening. I had spent so many years trying to earn validation from people incapable of seeing the value in what I built. My journey toward healing began with a simple decision. I started therapy with Dr. Marshall, a family systems specialist who helped me understand the generational patterns at play in the Thompson family. "Your aunt's behavior isn't really about you," she explained during our third session. "People who need to diminish others are usually trying to manage their own insecurities." I began setting clear boundaries, declining family gatherings that felt obligatory rather than meaningful, ending phone calls when they turned critical, refusing to justify my decisions to people who had no actual authority over my life. I joined a preservation society that met monthly, surrounding myself with fellow enthusiasts who understood the joy of saving a historical detail from demolition. I reconnected with college friends I'd neglected while trying to prove myself to my family. Most importantly, I gave myself permission to enjoy my success without qualification or apology. The majestic theater preservation fund that I'd worked so hard to establish, the one my family hadn't bothered to attend, took on new meaning in the aftermath of my revelation. Instead of seeking my family's approval, I redirected that energy into the project itself. I established the Emma Thompson Fellowship for Young Preservationists, funding internships for students from underrepresented backgrounds interested in architectural conservation. The theater's grand reopening was scheduled for spring, and rather than sending obligatory invitations to uninterested relatives, I reserved front row seats for Miguel and his family, Walter Cunningham, my new Preservation Society friend, and the young fellows who had contributed to the restoration. The theater that had once represented my desperate bid for family recognition now symbolized my independence from their narrow definitions of success. My apartment, the space Tyler had so casually assumed he could claim, underwent a transformation as well. I hired Sophie, who had recently started an interior design business, to help me reimagine the penthouse as a true reflection of my aesthetic rather than the understated space I'd maintained to avoid Aunt Deborah's criticism. We incorporated salvaged architectural elements from my restoration projects. A stained glass transom from a Victorian townhouse became a stunning room divider. Brass hardware from an Art Deco hotel was repurposed into unique lighting fixtures. Each element told a story of preservation and reinvention. "This is so you, Emma," Sophie said as we finalized the designs. "It's like seeing your soul translated into physical space." The home I created wasn't just beautiful, it was authentically mine, free from the shadow of family judgment. The unexpected twist came 6 weeks after the confrontation, when Uncle Richard requested a private meeting at his downtown office. Unlike Deborah, who had continued sending alternately pleading and demanding messages, Richard had maintained a respectful distance, his only communication being that brief text of congratulations. His corner office offered a panoramic view of Boston Harbor, the trappings of conventional success displayed in tasteful understatement. "I've been watching you for years, Emma," he said after his assistant had served coffee and discreetly withdrawn. "Your preservation work, your grant proposals, your community organizing, all of it." He smiled slightly at my surprise. "Deborah sees only the surface, the properties, the dollar values. I see the strategy, the vision, the execution." He leaned forward. "Tyler's development company is in trouble. The Riverside Heights project was counting on acquiring those brownstones you now own. Without them, the whole project collapses." I began to speak, but he held up a hand. "I'm not asking you to sell. Quite the opposite. I want to propose a partnership between Thompson Financial and Thompson Historical Properties, a new division focused on historical preservation and sustainable development." The proposal was unexpected but intriguing. Uncle Richard would provide capital investment for larger-scale preservation projects, while I would maintain complete creative and operational control. Our first joint venture would transform the Riverside Heights development from luxury condominiums into mixed-income housing that preserved the brownstones' historical character while making them energy efficient and affordable. Tyler will need to adjust his expectations, Richard acknowledged, but it's time he learned that success comes from adaptation, not entitlement. As I left his office with a preliminary contract in hand, I realized that the family wasn't monolithic. After all, while Aunt Deborah had dominated the narrative, other currents had been flowing beneath the surface. Uncle Richard's respect for my work had existed all along. It had just been overshadowed by his wife's louder voice and his own reluctance to challenge her publicly. The revelation about my property ownership didn't just change my relationship with my biological family, it expanded my definition of what family could be. Miguel, who had stood up for me that day in the community room, invited me to his daughter's college graduation celebration. Walter Cunningham began a tradition of monthly lunches where he shared stories of old Boston and the buildings we both loved. The young fellows in my preservation program looked to me for mentorship and guidance. Sarah Cunningham, Walter's grandniece, became a close friend and collaborator on a book documenting Boston's hidden architectural treasures. This chosen family supported me not out of obligation but genuine appreciation, a stark contrast to years of seeking validation from people determined not to give it. As Dr. Marshall observed in one of our sessions, sometimes the family we're born into prepares us to recognize the family we're meant to build. 1 year after that fateful family reunion, I stood on the rooftop terrace of the renovated Majestic Theater, watching the sunset paint Boston's skyline in shades of gold and amber. The grand reopening had been a resounding success, with the mayor declaring it a triumph of preservation and community vision. The theater now housed not only performances, but also affordable studio spaces for local artists, educational programs for public school students, and a small museum documenting the building's century-long history. Below me, the last guests from the day's events were filtering out, Preservation Society members, community supporters, my young fellows proudly giving tours of their handiwork. Miguel and his family had attended as my honored guests, his daughter Lucia now working as the theater's community outreach coordinator. My partnership with Uncle Richard had expanded to 3 additional projects across the city, each balancing historical integrity with community need. My father had become a regular consultant, his academic knowledge of period aesthetics proving invaluable in restoration decisions. My mother had made her own journey over the past year, gradually reclaiming her voice in family conversations. Our relationship had evolved into something more honest, not always comfortable, but genuine in a way it had never been before. I let Deborah's voice drown out my own for so many years, she confessed during a quiet lunch at my apartment. I watched her diminish you, and I told myself I was keeping the peace by staying silent. Her hands trembled slightly around her teacup. The truth is, I was afraid of conflict, afraid of losing her approval, afraid of admitting that my brilliant, determined daughter had found a path I never had the courage to imagine for myself. That simple acknowledgement that her silence hadn't been indifference, but fear, opened a door to healing I hadn't known existed. Aunt Deborah and I had reached an uneasy détente. After months of alternating between hostility and manipulative overtures, she had finally accepted that the power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. Our interactions remained formal, limited mostly to necessary family functions, but the constant diminishment had ceased. Tyler, surprisingly, had undergone the most dramatic transformation. After the collapse of his original development plans, he had faced a crisis of identity. Without his mother's automatic validation and faced with actual professional consequences for his lack of preparation, he had been forced to reevaluate. To everyone's surprise, including his own, he had discovered a genuine interest in sustainable development, enrolling in courses and eventually joining one of our mixed-income housing projects as a junior team member. I never actually had to work for anything before, he admitted during an awkward coffee meeting. It's harder than I thought, but also better. Like, I actually care about what I'm building now. The journey hasn't been perfect. There are still family gatherings where old patterns threaten to reassert themselves. Moments when a casual comment from Aunt Deborah can still trigger that familiar sting. The difference is that now I recognize those reactions for what they are, echoes of old wounds, not reflections of my current reality. I've learned to distinguish between criticism offered in good faith by people who value my work and the dismissive judgment of those who never intended to see me clearly. Most importantly, I've learned that waiting for validation from people committed to misunderstanding you is a form of self-betrayal. The day I stopped seeking Aunt Deborah's approval was the day I fully claimed my own accomplishments. What I've come to understand is that authentic success isn't measured by square footage or property values or even professional accolades. It's found in the alignment between your deepest values and your daily actions. For me, that alignment comes in preserving the stories embedded in historical buildings, in creating spaces where communities can gather and thrive, in mentoring young preservationists who bring fresh perspectives to old structures. It comes in recognizing that my worth was never dependent on my family's assessment, that their inability to see me clearly was their limitation, not mine. And perhaps most surprisingly, it comes in realizing that setting clear boundaries with family isn't an act of rejection, but an invitation to a more honest relationship. If you're watching this and recognizing echoes of your own family dynamic, know that you're not alone. So many of us have experienced the pain of being diminished by the people who should champion us, of having our achievements reframed as deficiencies, our passions dismissed as impractical. It's a special kind of hurt when the people who should see you most clearly are determined to misunderstand you. But here's what I've learned. You don't need their permission to build something meaningful. You don't need their validation to know your own worth. And sometimes, the most powerful statement you can make is simply standing in your truth and allowing others to adjust their perceptions accordingly. The journey toward authentic self-recognition isn't about dramatic confrontations, though sometimes those happen. More often, it's about the quiet daily choices to honor your own vision even when others can't see it. It's about surrounding yourself with people who celebrate rather than diminish your unique gifts. It's about recognizing that family, true family, is defined not by DNA but by mutual respect, support, and the freedom to grow into your fullest self. Sometimes that includes biological relatives. Sometimes it doesn't. The choice is yours, and that choice is power. Today, as I look out over the city I've helped to preserve, I feel a deep sense of alignment with my purpose. The buildings I've saved will outlast me, carrying their histories forward for future generations. The communities that gather in these spaces will create new stories within the framework of the old. The young preservationists I mentor will bring their own vision to this work long after I'm gone. This legacy isn't measured in property values or portfolio size, but in the continuity of human experience, in the preservation of beauty and craftsmanship in a world that often values only the new and disposable. That's success by my definition, the only one that matters. If this story has resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own experiences in the comments below. Have you had to redefine family on your own terms? Have you found the courage to stand in your truth despite others' attempts to diminish you? Share your story, because every time one of us speaks our truth, we create space for others to recognize and speak theirs. Subscribe for more conversations about building authentic success and establishing healthy boundaries, and share this video with someone who might need to be reminded of their own worth today. Remember, the most beautiful renovations often begin when we have the courage to tear down structures that no longer serve us.